The Humankind game Cultures of Africa DLC released on the 21st of January, so it's been out for a little while now. Time to reflect on it, having spent quite a bit of time playing it myself. In this video, we're going to cover off, firstly, what the Cultures of Africa DLC actually was, very quickly. Secondly, I'm going to cover off, was it worth it? How was it received? Was it worth its price tag? Did it deliver to the game? And then thirdly, in the final part of this video, I'll give a little bit more of my personal opinion, perspective, looking a little bit at the roadmap for what's coming next for Humankind as well, to try and piece together a picture for what future DLC should look like, and whether the Cultures of Africa DLC delivered on that expectation as well. Without any further ado, my name is JumboPixel. Let's jump in and take a look at the Cultures of Africa. For starters, let's remind ourselves what this DLC pack actually added. It added 6 new cultures, 5 new wonders, 7 independent people for whatever that matters, 15 new narrative events, quite nice, and 18 new in-game themed music tracks. The key thing, of course, were these 6 cultures. Bantu in the first era, the expansionist, the Garamantes, the Swahili, super powerful. Then we had the Maasai, the Ethiopians, and the Nigerians. The 5 wonders, of course, down below there. In this video, you're going to see gameplay of all 6 of those new cultures. Thanks to the help of a mod and some clever game pacing and setup, you're going to see all 6 of them in one go. Incredible. Now, let's move on and talk about the DLC itself. And was the DLC pack worth it? Was the Cultures of Africa DLC worthwhile? Let's be real, largely for most players in most games, it's the 6 cultures that it added where the most sort of additional value was sought. Okay, the 5 new wonders, great. 7 independent people, 15 narrative events, nice too. But really, it's the cultures themselves that really packed the punch for the Cultures of Africa DLC pack. It maybe was in the name. It retailed at $13.59 New Zealand, which I'm guessing off the top of my head is around 9 to 10 US dollar equivalent, maybe 8 if you're lucky. Either way, this is a relatively cheap and inexpensive DLC pack for Humankind, the first of its kind. It's important to note, it released 5 months after the initial release of the game. We're yet to see any significant DLC expansion packs that actually add to gameplay and features, but this is where we're at, okay? There we are. That's what the Cultures of Africa DLC is. Now, was it and is it worth it? That's a lot of it's in one sentence. I'd like to highlight these 2 reviews. I'm going to leave them on the left-hand side of the screen for a little bit. You can pause and read them yourself if you like. They are the 2 most popular reviews for the Cultures of Africa DLC pack on Steam at the time of recording this video. I think they're important because they capture the mixed sentiment that the community received, or the community gave, I should say, to the Cultures of Africa DLC pack, okay? This was mixed reviews, you may have noticed at the start of the video, and I think these two really summarize it. And then the third one actually summarizes my perspective, but more on that later. Let's look at the facts. The positive review generally says, basically, while this is a slightly pricey offering for 6 cultures, considering mods can add some, and there are 40 plus cultures in the game, you can just click a button, add them in with your mods. Even if, I guess, you ran the equations on the base cultures in the game, you might determine that these are, quote, slightly pricey. Either way, the reviewer goes on to say that overall the pack's about a 7 out of 10, there's nice variety added by it, but nothing essential. The price is just right, that it's accessible enough, it's not too expensive. Most players who have already spent some 50 so US dollars on the game won't struggle to spend another 5 to 10 more, essentially, is what they're saying. They say, I recommend it if you're having fun with Humankind already and want to keep the ball rolling. And I think that's a fairly agreeable review. I mean, it's hard to argue. Is it a cheap DLC pack? Yes. Will it keep the ball rolling and add some extra flavor? Yes. Let's consider the other side of this equation. Is it worth it? Or is it not? This review, and this is the most popular negative one, it takes a little bit of a different stance. It starts off by saying that this is not what we need, and to paraphrase it a little bit in my own words, basically this perspective, this reviewer says, what's missing from Humankind is fun and balanced systems. Pollution, wonders, strategic resources have structural problems. They go on to list a few other things that need balancing. They say that while there are lots of thoughtful reviews on how to fix it, This expansion doesn't address any of these problems. It offers more stuff, but doesn't offer any improvements to the basic systems of the game, and the fundamental, quote, fun-breaking flaws remain. This perspective, I think it does a reasonable job at capturing most of the negative sentiment, just like the review above it did a pretty good job at capturing most of the positive sentiment. This review essentially argues that there are too many base fundamental issues or problems or whatever they called them within Humankind, that by stopping and addressing those first before adding more content, they'd be providing a better experience for players. This is the argument essentially in a nutshell. To answer the question that I phrased at the start of this video, before I go in to share some of my own personal thoughts and reflections on these and give more of a personal touch as someone with some 500 hours in Humankind, maybe I'm qualified to do so. Maybe also I'm not though. It could be incredibly, in fact I likely am incredibly biased, but let's wrap up this section first. This more critical, reflective section. Is the DLC pack worth it? Now obviously I can't tell you whether it's worth it for you, and despite what people might tune into the comments and say, telling you like it's fact, it's not. They don't understand you and neither do I. The cost of this DLC pack may be too much. You may only play Humankind once a year or twice a year, and for you, that may not be a necessary extra expense, even if the price is too much. Or, like a lot of the negative reviewers, you might just not like Humankind, in which case, it might not be for you. Is it worth it though? Putting those factors aside, I think the low barrier to entry, the official support for the official game, will and does make the Cultures of Africa DLC pack worth it. There's that out of the way. Now I want to move into the final part of this video. My thoughts on the impacts of this DLC pack, on how it may shape some future DLC, and some of my perspectives on those other very popular and mixed perspectives and feedback that I just covered. Let's tuck in. So, the review that most synergizes with me was actually neither of those other two. It was this one here, the third most popular. I mean, for $9, dollar signs in the wrong place, that's right, you could do worse. If you like Humankind, this just gives you more content. I tend to agree. It's $9. You could do worse. It gives you more Humankind content. Content that was just as carefully curated and built as the rest. And content that, in my opinion, was actually a little more diverse and sort of pushed the boundaries in ways that the existing content within the game did not. For example, most of the districts aren't fixed to the city centre. You can kind of place them where you like. Think about that. The unique units were pretty interesting as well, all quite varied. Some of the later cultures were very specific and nuanced. Think about the Nigerians and their oil, for example. Even the Bantu, actually, a great extension to the early game Neolithic era. I thought it was a DLC pack that was totally fine, totally acceptable for a low price to entry. Fantastic. A couple of things that I want to unpack that came about in those previous reviews, and also a couple more. Actually, let's take a look at this one first and highlight one of the negative reflections of the DLC. So this person kind of echoes what the previous one said. I'll throw their comment down in the bottom left of the screen now. Basically they say, I wouldn't recommend this for the quote sad fact that the game is in such a poor state. We need balance fixes and expansions to existing mechanics, religion, natural wonders, social policies, base game buildings, etc. I love playing the game, I think it's super fun and has potential, I want to see it succeed. I've had fun with these new cultures, but it's not what we need right now. Actually, a really decent reflection on the DLC. I do think, though, that there are two things to unpack. Firstly, it's a shame that the DLC is being judged against the base game. The player says that they really thought that this was fun, they enjoyed playing the new cultures, but they gave the DLC pack a bad review because they reflect poorly on the base game. I think that's a shame. We're sort of reviewing a product for its base game, and maybe this review is better placed on the base game rather than the Cultures of Africa DLC. Something to bear in mind. I'm very much focused on the DLC itself, not the wider game. However, the broader sentiment around the wider game, just to play devil's advocate, you could also argue that actually it's possible to do both at once, and creating this kind of content I would argue, and again, I'm not connected to Amplitude, I don't actually know, this is just my speculation. I would speculate that it's entirely possible to improve on a game's base experience through, for example, the myriad of patch updates and fixes that I've covered on my channel here, and provide new additional content, whether it's purely aesthetic content and events and those smaller things, or larger, more substantial DLC releases like the Cultures of Africa. Speaking of the Cultures of Africa, though, and putting those reflections and really my critiques of those negative arguments aside, because personally, and again, this is just my perspective, I don't think they stand. I think generally people are evaluating their opinions of the base game against a DLC expansion, where they're being asked to just evaluate the DLC expansion, not the base game here. And then secondly, kind of confusing two different things that I believe we've already seen evidence of happening at the same time. They are not mutually exclusive. We have seen significant updates to the game that have improved both the stability of it, the overall gameplay features, the combat, for example, unit balance, that kind of thing, cultural balance. I think Amplitude can do both at the same time, and I think that they've proven that already. So what should we expect moving forward then? And again, this is a little bit of speculation. I'd encourage you to speculate below in and around the comments. I'm sure they'll be very varied. I suspect, looking at their history, looking at the history of similar historical 4X strategy franchises like Civilization 5 and Civilization 6, that we'll likely see a mixture of these kinds of Cultures of Africa DLC releases, right? These small, targeted releases, whether it be at a specific continent or a time period, or just adding cultures, or just adding wonders and events, or whatever, I don't know. But I think we'll see some of these, maybe laced in with some more significant, proper sort of quote-unquote expansion packs. Rise and Fall for Civilization 6, for example. Those big, meaty upgrades and updates that add things like, if I reflect on Civilization 6, a World Congress. I'm never going to shut up about a World Congress. I'm sorry, I love late-game diplomacy, and I would love for Humankind to have some more of it. It's just me. Either way, thank you very much for joining me today to reflect on the Cultures of Africa DLC. Was it worth it? Why were there so many mixed reviews? Were they well substantiated or not? At the end of the day, of course, like I say, it is up to you. It's your judgment call. It's your money to spend, and more importantly, your time to spend. Make sure that you spend both of them wisely, which probably means you should stop spending it with me. I'm gonna go. Alright, thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.